Hello, everybody. Let me get switched over to the comments real quick. Hang on just a second. I think I'm getting some reverb here. Hello, hello, hello. All right. So hopefully you're not hearing what I'm hearing. And it looks like we've already got somebody in here. Hello, Teresa. How are you doing? Please share, share, share. We've got an absolutely batshit bonkers story for you tonight, and I hope you enjoy it. This one was a really, really interesting one, to say the least, and something almost seems like straight out of some sort of gothic narrative or book or something. So, really cool story we're going to be sharing tonight. But sharing out the streams is the best way to support your content art. And let me know, guys, if you hear that same reverb. It's kind of bugging. Oh, and we have Stephen P. Kitty Cat in the house. Hello, Stephen P. Kitty Cat. I'm so glad you're here. Let's try this one more time. We always seem to have gremlins here in the studio. All right. So let's see. Let's go through here. So Teresa said hello, hello, and then Stephen P. Kitty Cat said meow, and Teresa says she's doing well. So that's great. So guys, go ahead and share out. Also, don't forget about our new Patreon. We will be having a expanded episode tonight, going on over another really cool story. Again, I happened upon these, and I'm surprised they're not more well known, especially the one we're about to get into here in just a moment. I'm going to give everybody just a couple more minutes uh, to file in here. I'm not sure if the Facebook notifications went out or not. So, yeah, so grab your popcorn, get ready. And this one pretty much starts out with a bang right from the beginning. So, yeah. Couple more minutes. Dead air space. All right. So let's go ahead and get started on this. Again, this is a really batshit bonkers story tonight. And this one was kind of weird to research. Usually, when I'm researching these, I either, base it on a book that I've read that has pretty accurate information, or, double checking sources, things like this. This one was a little bit different. You almost had to go in individually to these people to actually find kind of full the full story. Um, I did have some problems figuring out who had who married who, and who was whose brother or sister. Not to say that there couldn't have been some sort of incestuous hanky panky going on. That was probably very likely. Plus, it seemed people like to use the same name um, for their daughters and their sons and things like that. So it got super confusing, but I got it pretty well hashed out to try to keep it as clear for you as I absolutely can. So tonight we're talking about the Black Sisters of Virginia. They're also known as just the Black Sisters. Um, Now, in late November of 1909, the East Orange, New Jersey police responded to a distress call from Virginia War Laws residents. Now, initially, they were informed about an accident involving Virginia's niece. Her name was O.C. Sneed. However, upon arriving, the officers made a grim discovery. It looked like it wasn't actually an accident, but maybe more of a suicide. What they found, though, was Osie's lifeless body laying in the upstairs bathtub, apparently the victim of a drowning slash suicide. Now, as the investigation unfolded over a few weeks, it became evident that Osie's death was not a tragic accident. Suspicion swiftly turned towards Virginia and her two sisters, who were subsequently charged with the murder of Osie. Now, investigators believe that the motive behind the alleged crime was to collect a substantial insurance policy. And if you've tuned into some of the other uh, shows that I've done, insurance a lot of times, like when we were talking about the cemeteries and things like that, how cemeteries came about, um, there was a lot of insurance fraud going on during the early 20th century, uh, late 19th century. Now, while O.C. Sneed's murder was undeniably tragic, it marked the beginning of a gripping crime narrative that would captivate the early 20th century. Now, as detectives and the press delved deeper into the lives of the three accused women, a strange and macabre tale emerged, reminiscent of, like I said earlier, a classic Southern Gothic horror novel. And this stuff is for real. Like, I was like, what the? Now, the trial of Virginia Wardlaw and her sisters unfolded like basically reading a book or some sort of horror story, replete with unbelievable twists and culminating in a shocking and unexpected conclusion. And you may not feel completely satisfied at the end of this, but it's definitely a story that I found fit right in with what I do. So, and it looks like we have Roots Bleed Red here. Hello. And they say drowning suicide's absolutely insane. Yeah, I don't. No, I think if I were going to unalive myself, I could find an easier way than that. That would be awful. Now, just to give you a little bit of information as far as like who these people are, and like I said, this is the part that took me the longest because it was extremely confusing because the records that far back are they're just inadequate. So I had to go back and forth. Of course, I started with Wiki because that kind of just has kind of like the overall information. And then I had to bounce back and forth between like historical societies and ancestry.com, things like that. So Oceana, which is Osi or Oshi, which Oshi it was a very common way to shorten the name Oceana, which I think is a beautiful name. Now, she was born in September of 1885, most likely in New York City. Now, she was the daughter of Carolyn Bell Wardlaw, and Carolyn was born in 1848. Now, Carolyn, her mother, was married to Colonel Robert Maxwell Martin, who had fought for the Confederacy during the Civil War. Now, there he had served with General John Hunt Morgan. During this time, Martin was severely wounded in the process of actually saving Morgan's life. And that took place in McMinnville. He did wind up surviving and went on to lead the Confederates. Well, both of them actually wound up surviving. But Morgan went on to lead the Confederate plot to burn New York City to the ground. So we pretty much know that that was a failure. Now, they both eluded capture after the mission failed and attempted to abduct Vice President Andrew Johnson. So they were busy little bees. Now, Mr. Martin was eventually taken into custody and while he was incarcerated, he revealed to a fellow inmate, it is said, the knowledge of the plot to assassinate President Abraham Lincoln and admitted knowing assassin John Wilkes Booth. Now, after the war, he moved to Evansville, Indiana, and then back to his native Kentucky, where he built a mansion that, along with its stables and grounds, took up an entire block. That's how large this was in Winder Park, which is a suburb of Louisville. Now, he earned money in the tobacco industry, with the house costing what was then an amazing $30,000, which would be much, much more now, and the barns and stables at $8,000. Now, that was back then. So this place must have been massive. However, in the turbulent economy of the post Civil War days, Martin won and lost several fortunes, and during that time gained his wife, Carolyn Wardlaw. Now, when the house burnt mysteriously, Martin lived for a while in a small dwelling built on the property before returning to New York to make another go at a financial recovery. It was sometime around the 1900 when the first of a long series of suspicious deaths began with the death of Martin's son, who was injured in a long fall down steps at the family's home in New York. Now, the child very shortly after wound up dying from what the doctors had said was a brain fever. So most likely something like encephalitis or meningitis is what they claimed on the basically what took his life, and what they wound up, I guess, claiming on a life insurance policy that Wardlaw and Martin had taken out on the child. Uh, and with that particular life insurance policy, they collected $22,000 on the boy, which would have again have been much much more than that. So it was a very big policy during that time. Now, following his death, the family moved to a nicer home off Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. It didn't take long for the dashing Confederate colonel to develop medical problems of his own. Within 2 months of arriving back in New York, neighbors heard groans and a crash and rushed to the aid of the colonel, who had suffered what they said was a paralytic stroke. A stern-looking Carolyn, however, was reported sitting above her unconscious husband, and his daughter Oceana was weeping. Now, the rumor is that the mother cautioned her daughter not to speak. Now, the colonel died at Dr. Miller's sanitarium on 59th Street in New York City. He was 61 years old, and following the colonel's death, Carolyn and her daughter, Oceana, moved back to Murfreesboro, where they joined Carolyn's sister, Virginia, and Mary at Soule College. Now, Carolyn herself had had a career in education, but at one point she was removed from that position for unstable behavior. So Carolyn's something else. So, and I see Raven's here. Hello, Raven. How are you? Raven says hello. And then Roost Bleed Red says, how are people ignorant of suspicious behavior? I think a lot back then, and we even saw it up until like the 1960s. It was kind of like mind your business. It's just something that people did. They just really didn't get involved in other people's business. It's the only thing that I can assume. But you are absolutely right. Now, Carolyn Bell Wardlaw had three sisters, and this is what I was able to kind of clarify because things were so freaking confusing. To kind of keep a mental note of this as we go through the story. Now, Carolyn Bell Wardlaw married Colonel Robert Maxwell Martin, which we knew. They had two children, which was Oceana Wardlaw Martin Sneed, and then, of course, the son that fell down the steps. He was 7 years old at the time of his death, and his name was Hugh Hodge Barton, and he was born in 1881 and died in 1888. Now, Carolyn's sister, her other sister, was Mary Elizabeth Long Wardlaw. Now, she married Fletcher Tillman Sneed, who weirdly later died in 1891. Now, they had three sons, John B. Wardlaw Sneed. Some say senior, some say not. So it gets a little confusing with John. And there's some references to there may be also be an uncle that has the same freaking name. So things get really, really confusing. Now, John was born in 1874. They also had another son by the name of Fletcher Wardlaw Sneed. He was born in 1875. And then last but not least, Albert Charles Sneed, who was born in 1880. So we kind of have that as a base. Now, Virginia Oceana Wardlaw, who herself was born in 1852, she never married. So you have three sisters, two of them have children, one does not. Now, to kind of give you a little bit of a backstory or where we're kind of going with this and where a lot of these really mysterious disappearances and things like that occur, is going to be at these schools. Now, founded in 1851, Seoul College offered a traditional Southern education for women in cultural studies and social graces. It was located on Maple Street in Murfreesboro. The school grew and prospered after the Civil War and reached its zenith at the turn of the century when Virginia and her sister Mary were in charge. So they were, at that time, very good teachers and administrators. At the time, these two names were really synonymous with distinction and education, and the two educators were described as brilliant women of fine character and gentle demeanor. Now, in 1903, the two sisters bought the school from the church-affiliated trustees. So the school pretty much just came up for sale. They bought it. But soon after, their older sister, Carolyn, the nutty one, who was recently a widow, arrived from New York and took over management of the school's finance. Her daughter, Oceana, who was 16 at the time, arrived with her and enrolled as a student. Now, Mary's two sons, John and Fletcher, also joined the faculty, but they later returned to Linville, Tennessee, whereas Oceana stayed with the three sisters at the school. Now, Oshie was no longer seen after a while, and it was alleged that she was suffering from some sort of debilitating malady, is the way they explained it. Now, soon there were rumors among students and staff of occult practices and other strange activities. An inordinate number of tragedies occurred, among them the disappearance of an illegitimate baby who was born to a student, just mysteriously disappeared. They don't know what happened to it. Bills were unpaid and enrollment plummeted. Rumors were spread throughout the community about strange activity of the three sisters who started at this time. They just all started wearing like mourning, what they call like the widow weeds, the mourning attire. So they were dressed all in black with like the heavy mourning clothes and the black veils, just something like straight out of The Woman in Black. Super creepy. Now, the sisters in black grew even more eccentric over time, chanting as they roamed the halls of the college on Maple Street. Now, as far as Oshie is concerned, her classmates at school also regarded her as kind of peculiar. Now, when Virginia was forced to resign, the sisters then moved to Christiansburg, Virginia, and basically took over a school by the name of Montgomery Female Academy. But kind of to give you kind of a little bit more of a backstory, because it kind of jumps around just a little bit. Now, after arriving, Carol and Martin headed south. Once they got to the Montgomery Female School, she headed south on what she called an import mission. And it was to recruit her nephew, John Sneed, which was her oldest, to teach at the academy. Now, Fletcher and John, who I had told you guys earlier, had moved back to Linville, Tennessee. They, during the time that the sisters were at Seoul College, they had opened a sawmill together. And also during this time, they were courting the women who they would become, basically, they would wind up marrying in a double wedding. Now, these two women were both the daughters of a prominent local lawyer by the name of J.R. McLaurin. John married Anne McLaurin in 1903, and Fletcher married her sister uh, Vashti, 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 in 1899. Oh, and it looks like Frank's here. Hello, Frank. How are you? And he says, hello, odd mother. Hello, friend. Oh, it just doesn't want to stay up there. There we go. All right. So they're down in Linville. They've opened up a sawmill. They're married. They're invested in this community. And so Carolyn decides she's going to go down there on her import mission to recruit her nephew John to come teach at the academy. Now, around 1906, when Carolyn visited John in Linville, uh, she kind of started insisting that John return with her to Christiansburg, like I said, to teach at the school. However, John's wife was not really pleased. She was not impressed with Carolyn at all, and she pleaded with him to stay. Now, at first, he refused his aunt's demands, even having police remove Carolyn from his house. He told his neighbors he wouldn't allow Carolyn to wreck his home. Now, Carolyn went away, and then she came back in a few weeks. However, it doesn't really explain, but John just up and decided to accompany her back to school. And so they both returned to Christiansburg, basically leaving his wife behind. Now, the wife, she wrote letters, but John was now pretty much under some sort of control of Carolyn. And I'm telling you, it's just going to get weirder with this family. Um, and so she would write letters, and he would return them. And after a while, his wife Anna, she just basically kind of just worried herself to death. And her health did wind up declining, and eventually she was placed in the sanitarium, which back then it's not really like an asylum; it's more like a hospital. Now, John's spirits also seemed to decline after he left Linville and returned with his aunt. On the way to Christiansburg, there were one occasion to where some some say he tried to commit suicide. However, others say he could have been pushed. Others say that it could have been an accident. But there were two occasions that were basically either, like I said, suspected murder or suspected suicide or attempts of suicide. Now, one is on his way back. He fell off the train near Roanoke during that trip with Carolyn. Now, they insisted it was an accident, but the brakeman felt he had witnessed a suicide attempt. But again, you never know. Now, a few weeks later, John was then pulled from an open cistern just in time to save his life. Now, this time, Virginia was the one that raised the alarm and explained basically that it was just an accident. And if you don't know what a cistern is, it's kind of like you can see them sometime on old homesteads. It's going to be like a big cement, and I'm talking big, uh, like box, and they're usually kind of in the ground a little bit, but above ground, and those things can be really deep. They can be up to 20 feet deep, but it's basically to hold the rainwater, or it's like a holding tank, whether it's rainwater or it's coming from a spring or something like that. So apparently he was supposed to be in there cleaning out the cistern, and then somehow almost drowned. Um, Now John had been taking measures, supposedly measurements, to provide a water supply measurement for the school. Now a week later, Virginia again raised an alarm at 8 o'clock in the morning. John was found thrashing about on the floor of his room at the college. He was fully engulfed in fire. 3 hours later, he died of first-degree burn. The three sisters insisted again it was an accident, not a suicide. And eventually they did receive another insurance settlement in the amount of $12,000, which at today's rate, that would be 406,933 as of 2023. So that was a lot of money. that they got off this particular insurance policy. Now later, it would emerge that they had doused him with kerosene and burnt him alive while he slept just to collect the insurance policy. Now, while John's last months were playing out, Carolyn then traveled back to Linville, Tennessee, and insisted that Fletcher accompany her to Louisville concerning some sort of family property. Now, Bashi later learned that he had fallen, or supposedly she was told that he had fallen ill on the train en route to Louisville in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now, she traveled to Chattanooga, but was refused permission to see Fletcher by Carolyn, who claimed that he was just too ill. A week later, when Fletcher did not return as Carolyn had promised, his wife made a second trip to Chattanooga and discovered that Fletcher had been moved from one boarding house to another by a woman that answered or basically fit Miss Martin's or Carolyn's description. She returned home and after a period of time obtained a divorce. That's when Fletcher then came to the college and wound up marrying his first cousin, Oceana. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. I've been trying to catch them at little spurts, but I haven't really been able to look at them. But we'll just stop right there for just a minute so that we can get into the shenanigans again here in just a moment. So let's see where we're at. All right, so Akia is joining us from over on X. And guys, if you are not following us over there, we are a whole lot more political over there. So if politics aren't your thing, then don't worry about it. But we are over there. We are broadcasting. So she's over there. Hello, hello, hello. I got everybody. And then Roots Bleed Red says that they had an aunt that was married 8 times. You know, it's weird because the more I look at this, it's like with these names, I don't know what you would do if you were married 8 times, but they carried on their name. Like some of these, you can tell like they'll have like several last names, and usually the last of the last names will be whoever it is they're married to at the time, but it will encompass all the other last names they went by. It's just really weird. So yeah, I'd hate to have to sign my name. So Rich Please Red said lots of Sneed. Oh my goodness. Well, let's just hope that you are in no way related to this Miss Sneed. But the funny thing is, these people originate as far as Mr. Martin, very close to the town where I was born. So that is not surprising at all. Um, that they're from that part of Georgia. And then Stephen Kitty Cat says, we need a flow chart of who's who. I know it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And it literally took me like 2 hours to straighten this shit out because I would go to one place and it's really John. John is what just throws a freaking wrench into everything. Because like I said, I think he's got an uncle that is named the same thing, even has B as an initial. And I was like, wait a minute. She's got a son, but now he's like an uncle. I don't understand. I'm so confused. So, but yeah, I think I got it pretty well hashed out. And I had to actually compare ancestry with the historical society in some of these towns to kind of get it a little bit more accurate. So I think I'm pretty accurate. And the recently read says, going to a school like that sounds like hell. Well, it's really about to start sounding like hell here in just a minute because they really start getting weird. And we got Rob. Hello, Rob. So glad you're here. So glad you could join us tonight. And guys, share, share, share. I know that we have been really pushing the patron, but it's, that is not like a have to or anything like that. Share with people that you think might enjoy these streams and these shows, and it's absolutely free, and it is absolutely the best way to support your content artist. So yeah, you just share things. All right. Okay. All right. So let's get back to this so that we don't run too far over. All right. Where were we at? All right. So Fletcher ups and apparently is hypnotized by Carolyn and winds up leaving his wife, Vishti, and comes back with Carolyn and marries his first cousin, Oceana. Now, Oshie and married Fletcher Wardlaw Sneed, who, again, was her first cousin in Louisville, Kentucky in 1906. The wedding took place in secret because what the family's story was is because basically they were, of course, oh, we are so opposed to this union, with them being first cousins and all. So they were super, super offended, I guess. But weirdly, a second ceremony was held on January 13th of 1908 at Jersey City, New Jersey, after the sisters had been won over shortly before the birth of Oshie and Fletcher's first child. Now, together they had two children. And here we go, Stephen P. Kitty Cat with the names again. Mary Albert Sneed, who was born in 1908 and died at birth, and David Pollock Sneed, who was born in 1909 but only lived a year, to 1910. Now, for some unknown reason, after the death of their first child, and while Oshie was very early in the stages of her second pregnancy, Fletcher just up and disappears, and it turns out he winds up moving to Canada under an assumed name and never contacts his wife ever again. Just poof, up and leave, leaving her in the care of these three women. Now, Carolyn told Oceana that basically Fletcher he died. He died. That's what happened. He died. However, Fletcher, they knew where he was, and he would remain in contact with his mother and aunt throughout the rest of the stuff. So I didn't follow down that rabbit hole too much. Now, Montgomery College originally was established in 1853, which is where they're at now in Christiansburg. Um, it was established in 1853 as the Montgomery Collegiate Institute, and again, it was located in Christiansburg, Virginia, was founded and owned by Christiansburg Presbyterian Church, and operated out of the old church building on the corner of First and Franklin Street. In 1860, a new school was built on the present site and renamed the Montgomery Female Academy. And that's where these three sisters were actually teaching at the time. Now, Oceana, Seaborn, Goodall, Pollock, and Martha Eliza Wardlaw's sister, purchased the school in 1876. So to keep you from getting confused, that list of who's who, these are basically like aunts, great aunts that actually owned this particular school at the time. Now, when it was sold at public auction, that's when they purchased it. And one of them was actually a teacher at the school at the time. Now, in the 1880 census, it shows this is Pollock and her niece Virginia Wardlaw, nephews John and Albert Wardlaw, all living at this particular school, with Virginia listed as a teacher there. Within a year, John and his wife would be dead, They were only in their 20s at the time. And these are different nephews. Like I said, John B. and Albert G., which are the same names as Carolyn's, no, not Carolyn's son, Mary's son. Mary's son. So it was John Fletcher and Albert that was Mary's son, and they had extended family that ran this school up in Christiansburg, who also had nephews named John B. and Albert G. Wardlaw. I'm telling you, it was so confusing. Anyway, so just try to work that out in your brain. But it doesn't matter. They soon die in their early 20s, which was, I mean, I know people died early, but with this family, I'm sorry, that has got to be some sort of, I'm very suspicious. Let's just put it that way. Now, Miss Pollock, aged and infirm, she deeded the school to her sister, Martha Wardlaw, and her niece, Virginia. And this is the Virginia that we're talking about, uh, the one of the three sisters. Now, Virginia and Mary had inherited the real property of their father and their mother, um, and so they had enough cash basically to be able to apply to the school. They renamed it the Montgomery Female College, and all was well for a time until, which it seems to be kind of a, I don't know, just a like Carolyn always winds up showing up with Oceana, and then everything goes to shit. So it's like a pattern. Now, whether it's subconsciously a pattern, I would say no. But so then everything's going fine for a time, and the school's dormitories were refurbished, the curriculum was updated, and Virginia returned to her love of teaching. Soon, however, Mary Sneed arrived, followed by two of her sons, Fletcher and John. The trios arrived, creating no problems. However, again, now when Carolyn Martin arrived, accompanied by her daughter Oceana, things again swiftly went awry as Carolyn took over the administrative duties of the school. Now, she made sudden changes to the curriculum, moved students from one class to another for no apparent reason, instilled suspicious and secrecy by installing up to 3 padlocks on some doors. Like she just go around and like put multiple padlocks on doors. All three sisters again took to roaming the halls, surprising the residents with their sudden appearances. The three sisters were known to enter into several like students' rooms, and like the students would wake up and like see them standing at the end of their beds where they would just like recede into the shadows. Just a lot of really creepy stuff. Now, the three sisters again entered into several fraudulent businesses and fraudulent business deals in Christiansburg and the surrounding communities, again eroding any trust in with the residents of that area um, that they had been in, and it sparked much speculation about their habits. Again, more rumors spread in town that the sisters were engaging in secret rituals at the Christiansburg Sunset Cemetery around the graves um, of basically family members. The John B. who died, he did have a wife named Lizzie. They were the two that died when they were in their 20s. And supposedly they went to the grave and would be doing like all this mumbling and stuff over the grave. And that was reported by several, what they refer to as taxi drivers at the time. I know they didn't have cars back then, but I guess they still referred to, people that did like the horse and buggies and things like that as taxi drivers. So, and that was reported by a couple of different taxi drivers at the time, that they would drop them off and see them doing like really weird stuff at night at the cemetery. Now, during this time, the attendance at the school started to drop, and chaos reigned in the classroom. By 1904, the Montgomery Male Academy had closed, and the male students were now also attending the Montgomery Female Academy, the name of which, like I said, was the one that the sisters renamed, and now it is now known as Montgomery Hall, and basically Christiansburg had wound up building, actually, let me back up, hold on. It was known as Montgomery Hall during that time, but in Christiansburg, they did wind up actually, like, the middle school in this town is like built on this site, because basically what happens is once everything just starts going kind of to shit, vandals wind up breaking in, doing extensive damage to the school. And eventually, like I said, the female academy was raised and replaced by that public middle school, which stands today in Christiansburg. Now, by 1908, all three sisters, along with Oshie Sneed, left Christiansburg for New York City and New Jersey. The surviving members of the Wardlaw family were to eventually appear in East Orange, New Jersey, and, and there to become the focus of the crime of the century of that time. Now, Oshie had apparently always been kind of the object of scorn from her mother and aunts. And there are some rumors that Oshie was actually Virginia's daughter, the one that never married. And I don't know if that's true or not, but there seems to be a lot of speculation there that Virginia may have actually been her mother. But for whatever reason, they kind of saw her as a black sheep. But if you look at pictures of her, she was a beautiful girl, absolutely beautiful girl. Now, she may have been as fruity as a fruitcake. I don't know, coming from this family, but kind of makes you feel really bad for her, to be honest with you. Now, like I said, they looked at her kind of like a black sheep, um, and desperately, basically tried to starve her to death virtually from the day she was born. Now, subsequent to the departure of her husband, Oshie's health began to fail. A doctor by the name of Dr. William Pettit was called in to look at the sickly pregnant woman during her second pregnancy. He found her suffering from depression, general weakness, and malnutrition. She seemed depressed and indeed afraid of those around her, he told the police later. Pettit visited the Wardlaw household several times and repeatedly found that his instructions for Oshie's care were not being followed. He was like, "Look, guys, you need to feed this girl," and they just weren't doing it. They weren't doing it. Now, because of this, plus the fact that the sisters were just they weren't paying him, he basically stopped visiting. Um, so I mean, I understand having to make money, but I don't know, that would have been super hard. And really back then, there wasn't a whole lot that like law enforcement could do in situations like that to intervene. So the sisters wound up calling on another doctor who he himself wound up smuggling food into Oshie when after seeing her condition for the first time. However, not long after Oshie's baby was born, he was caught sneaking through a window to check on her, and basically Virginia threw him out. A lawyer was then contacted by this second doctor, but unfortunately he was told there was nothing that could be done about it. Several months later, Pettit was once again summoned and found Oshie to be even weaker than before when he was the first doctor and no longer pregnant. It was said that the baby, by the name of David, had been taken to the hospital after he was born because he was in such poor health. He was later placed in an orphanage by the sisters. However, he died within just 9 months of being there and now is buried next to his mother. Now, Virginia told Pettit to inform Oshie that she was dying and that she needed to make up a will. Instead, however, Pettit had a nurse brought in to care for Oshie. The nurse stayed just 1 day before being removed by all three sisters. Rather than pay the $100 bill presented by the doctor, the sisters offered to make him a $1,000 beneficiary in Oshie's will. He declined and decided to take steps against the family, believing that Oshie was under some sort of hypnotic influence. What he did not know was that Oshie was being given regular but unnecessary doses of morphine for her postpartum pain by her mother and aunts. When Pettit returned to check on Oshie before he reported the strange case to the police, he found the place abandoned and the sisters gone. So this would have been right around the time that they left Christiansburg and show up over in New Jersey. Now, like I said, the family, they next surfaced, though, in another Brooklyn neighborhood in September of 1909, when Virginia, wearing a thick layer of the, the widow weeds or the mourning attire, wound up paying a visit to a gentleman by the name of Julius Cabrera. He was a New York attorney and asked him to help a dying woman prepare a will. So she was basically going in and trying to get him to make up a will for Oshie. Now, Cabrera came to Oshie's bedside while her mother and aunts chanted prayers over her. After the prayers, Virginia asked Oshie if she wanted to make a new will, to which Oshie agreed. Cabrera told the woman that Oshie needed a doctor and some food. The sisters said they could afford neither. Cabrera offered to write them a check, and while the sisters left the room in search of a pen, he talked to Oshie. She told him that she was dying, reached under her pillow, and gave him her actual real will, in which she left everything to her grandmother and asked him to make himself the executor. The sisters offered Cabrera $7,000, which is equivalent to $237,000, 378,000 in 2023's like dollar amount, uh, to make him to make them the beneficiaries of her will. So basically, they wanted him to draw up a new will, and they would pay him if he would make them the beneficiaries of the will. Now he refused, and the sisters dropped him as their attorney. And by October of 1909, Oshie was near death from lack of food and medical care and was moved to an apartment at 89 East 14th Street in East Orange, New Jersey. There was no heat or gas for cooking, and the place was furnished with just two old cots, a rug, a chair, and a barrel for a table. And some say, if you look into some of the stories on this, that the sisters kind of became like hoarders, the whole hoarder thing, where it's just like trash. But the place was just basically disgusting. Now, the police were called by the family on November 29th of 1909 and told there was an accident. And this is where we started at the beginning of this. The police then sent a physician to their home. Virginia led Dr. Herbert M. Simmons, the assistant county physician, to an upstairs bathroom where Oshie's naked body was sitting in an upright position in a tub of water with her head tilted under the faucet. It looked really suspicious from the get-go. Now, a suicide note was supposedly pinned to her clothes that was beside the bathtub, and it read, "Last year, my little daughter died. Others, near and dear, kindred, too, have gone to heaven. I long to go there too. I have been ill and weak a very long time now. Death will be a blessed relief to me in my suffering. When you read this, I will have committed suicide. My sorrow and pain in this world are greater than I can endure." Signed, Oshie W.M. Sneed. Now, Oshie was buried on December 7th of 1909 at Mount Hope Cemetery beside her father, her 7-year-old brother, and her 2-day-old infant daughter. So I guess she lived like for 2 days, even though they just have the one date on there for the birth and death date. Her infant daughter, who was named Mary Albert, in Hastings on the Hudson in Winchester County, New York. Now, her infant son, David Pollock Sneed, who had been taken by the sisters shortly after birth and placed in an orphanage, when he died at the age of 9 months, he is now buried with the family. So let's see what's going on in the comments, and then we're going to get to into the investigation and the trial. And it looks like we have a ton of people in here. Oh, and Star's here. Hello, Star. She said, "Hello, Odd Mother." Well, I'm so glad you're here. Hello, hello. And Stimpy Kitty Cat says, "Blame Canada." It is weird. Like, I am curious as to what that deal was. I don't know. It's really odd. It reminds me of like some sort of like movie that you watch where they like put some sort of spell on somebody. I mean, the way that these people just up and these men just up and left their wives, and then Fletcher just up and leaves and disappears under assumed name. It's just really odd. Unless I mean, I can't say unless he was in on it, but it does kind of make you wonder unless he was in on it somehow. And Beth is here. Hello, Beth. So glad to see you. So glad you're here. Guys, share, share, share. That is the best way to support your streamers, and it's absolutely free. And Henry's here. Let's see. There we go. Hello, Henry. How are you? So glad you're here. Beth says, I came in and you said blame Canada. Poor Canada. No, we were talking about and you'll just have to catch it on the replay. But a character in this particular story, um, his name was Fletcher, and he takes off and he takes on an assumed name and moves to Canada. So yeah, it's way too much to try to explain. So you'll just have to watch the feed later if you've got time. Oh, and Sean's here. Hello, Sean. So glad you're here. We've got a ton of people in here tonight. And then we have Sarah. Hello, Sarah. You look to be a new victim here in the crypt. So let us know where you're from. I don't know if I've ever seen you in here in the horror gallery, but welcome, welcome, welcome. Like Hocus Pocus, something. It kind of reminds me of like, oh, what was that movie that was so good? Kind of like the Skeleton Key, and I cannot think for the life of me the name of it. It came out just a couple of years ago, um, and it was about this family who had been put under this hoodoo curse. That's kind of what this reminds me of. Um, and I'm surprised that this story is not better known. Um, because I mean, like I said, it took me a little while to kind of get the accurate information on it, but it wasn't that hard. And I'm sure I didn't look to see if there's any books that have like covered this. But it's just I'm surprised it's not more well known, to be very honest. All right, so I think that we have pretty much kind of covered. Oh, we've got Lori. Hi, Lori. How are you? So glad you're here. So let's get to the last of this because we're going to run over about 10 minutes. And then for you guys who are part of our Patreon, we will be going over another story that's just as batshit bonkers, involving a family from Tennessee and a gentleman by the name of Jeremiah Lexer. And that's got kind of an unusual, I don't want to say ending, but kind of like what's going on now, I think is absolutely ingenious. Um, but it's just as crazy of a story. So anyway, so let's get into the investigation of these three sisters um, and all the shenanigans and killings and murders and starvations and everything else that they've been involved in. All right, so Simmons deeded Virginia's answers. Let me read that again. Simmons deemed Virginia's answers to questions about Oshie's death suspicious, so he called the police to investigate. Oshie's death was identified as a drowning with starvation as a contributing cause. Suspicion for the death quickly focused on her family, particularly her mother and her two aunts. The investigator who originally arrived at the home noted that it was cold and appeared unoccupied, I guess talking about the home, and that the victim had been dead for at least 24 hours, prompting the investigators to wonder why there was a delay in discovering the body. The evidence against the sisters consisted of several life insurance policies that had been taken out on the young woman. Several suicide notes were also found in the possession of Oshie's mother, that were written in the same hand and similar style as the note alleged to have been Oshie's suicide note, and the family's treatment of Oshie prior to her death. All three were arrested and charged with murder. And this may leave you feeling a little bit unfulfilled. So it basically plays out like this. Virginia Wardlaw starved herself to death in prison in 1910 while she would have awaited trial. Carolyn Martin, the really, really nasty one, um, late into her actual trial, she actually went to trial, but late into her trial, finally pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was taken to jail, then transferred to an insane asylum where she died in 1913. Mary Sneed was released on a technicality since there was no charge at the time for basically an accomplice to manslaughter. And basically, just she moved to Colorado to live with her youngest son, Albert Charles Sneed, and they later moved to California, where she died in 1937. And that's it. That's how it ends. So it leaves you kind of a little bit unfulfilled. So hopefully, they're all getting like pineapples at this point um, down in Haiti. But yeah, that's just a completely batshit bonkers story on that one. So yeah, just look up if you're wanting to kind of look into this. And like I said, the information is a little peculiar when you start getting into people's names. But you just look up Black Sisters of Virginia. Um, and some of the references will go a little bit more in detail on some of this other stuff. But yeah, I thought that was a great story, and just really really nuts. So let's see what's going on in the comments, and then we're going to head on over to Patreon and finish up our expansion episode over there. But yeah, so Beth said she really enjoyed it, even though she was a little late. I'm glad you did. I really enjoyed this one too. This one was just crazy, and again, I don't understand why it's not more well known. And then Bruce Lee Red said that Sneed could be a relative by marriage. Uh-oh. Lori says, "Oh, I missed the story. Better late than never." Well, we're just glad you're here. We're just glad you're here. And then Jess over on YouTube says hello. Well, hello, Jess. You're coming in right at the end, unfortunately, but we're glad to have you here. Yep. And so Ruth Bleed Red says, you can see it up there. If you enjoyed this and you're interested in all the other really cool content, oh my God, last night, those were some, that was a very enlightening um, expansion episode on You Can't Sit With Us. We were talking about Dennis Rader and went over some of the crime scene photos and things like that. So yeah, so if you enjoy what we're doing here tonight, or you just kind of enjoy our content in general, go over there and subscribe to our $5 tier. Lots of content over there, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Pretty much like buying us a cup of coffee a month, and you'll be helping to keep the lights on. Everything goes right back into what we're doing here at GBC Collective. Oh, and to let you guys know, um, our spring season, at least for the horror galleries, almost over. Summer is almost upon us, so we've got one more episode until we take a break here at the horror gallery in order to get all the content ready for our fall season. We always enjoy our fall season. Lots of fun with that. And the spooky season and all the creepy things going on during that time period. All right, so I think. Oh, I'm sorry, Jess. Jess said, "Darn it, I'm so curious." Well, yeah, you can hit us on hashtag replay this episode, or you can join us over there on Patreon. We'll give you the link here in just a minute, and the link is also, it should be either up, depending on what platform you're on, either up or down in the comments as far as the actual post. So yeah, you can find a link there too, and a link to all of our other platforms as well. And Lori says, I never get notifications. Well, this is what we tell people. Go over to either Twitch or go over to YouTube and subscribe. They're a lot better. Even if you watch on Facebook, they're a lot better about getting out the notifications, and at least it'll give you a heads up that one of our shows are on, whatever given night. That would be the easiest thing to do, to make sure that you're getting the notification. Yes, it's halfway to Halloween almost. I am so excited. I'm so excited. So, and I'll still be doing some things during the summer over on the Patreon. Um, Probably just like little shows, but we're gonna keep that content going for you over there. So yeah, on that. You'll still be getting content over there from me during the summer months. All right. Well, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Like I said, I'm about to head on over to Patreon, and we'll see you guys there, hopefully. Bye, and pleasant nightmares, guys.